It's not often these days that I can say the name Obama without flying off into the depths of space. It's no longer outrage or outrage at all the outrages, like blaming the death of our ambassador and 3 others on our freedom of speech, let's say, and then discovering that afterwards he was advised that the embassy was currently under attack and on fire. He decided to hit the sack because there's a big fundraising day tomorrow, that kind of thing. No, this is just a mere annoyance by those lofty standards, but it's annoying enough for me to pay attention to because it's a violation, to my mind, of the only real campaign promise broken by the Obamas. So joining me now to be gently miffed during these times of great outrage and unprecedented disgrace are your trifecta stalwarts Steve Green and Scott Ott. Gents, First Lady Michelle Obama recently spoke to the Congressional Black Caucus. Kind of boilerplate remarks, really, but one sentence jumped out at me and it got me thinking. Let's take a look.
Now, back when our great-grandparents were riding that Underground Railroad, back when John Lewis was marching across that bridge in Selma, and Jim Clyburn was sitting in an Orangeburg jail, the injustices we faced were written in big, bold letters on the face of our laws. And while we may have had our differences over strategy, the battles we needed to fight were very clear.
Still got those level of problems, they're just a little harder to find. Boys, I did a little math, which we all know is the mortal enemy of the Obamas, and taking a generation at its normal value of 20 years, it's a little longer than 20 years now, it used to be a little bit shorter. We could take a look at some of Michelle's great-great-grandparents riding the Underground Railroad idea. Now, as it turns out, Michelle Obama apparently does have a great-great-grandfather and a great-great-great-grandmother, but they're not great-grandparents. Breaks down like this. Michelle's born in '64, so 20 years early would be her mother in 1944. 1924 would be her grandmother. 1904 would be her great-grandmother, the ones that supposedly rode on the Underground Railroad. 1884 would be a great-great-grandmother. 1864, that's just a year after emancipation, would be a great-great-great-grandmother. Turns out that great-grandparents are about halfway to slavery, but let's not quibble about this little thing, because honestly, Scott, this is what bothers me about the Democratic rhetoric. This idea that we're just inches away from slavery, just barely got the door closed on slavery. Now we have to fight hard before those Republicans can get us back in chains again.
Well, it's the most craven kind of abuse of the whole civil rights movement and the sacrifice that so many people made for so many years in a forward-looking way to say, imagine how it will be when we are free, when black children and white children will hold hands and sing free at last, thank God Almighty we're free at last. And what we've actually got now is a black First Lady of the United States holding hands with her white donors and supporters and saying, the black people are still in chains, telling the Congressional Caucus the black people are still in chains. The freedom that we yearned for, that we looked forward to, is now upon us. And instead of looking forward to what we can now do with it, we're looking backward to the sins and offenses of the past and attributing them to guys who live today who have not a trace of that which we hate from the past.
Spot on. Exactly right. Steve, am I the only person in the whole world who's bothered by this? Or do you feel as I do, that this country deserves better than to hear how racist we still are from the First Lady of the United States?
Bill, if you want to have an honest talk about racism in this country, let's do that. Look, Obama won in 2008 with about 53% of the vote, a little higher. You have to go back to Reagan in '84 to find someone who did better than that in the popular vote. But once he was sworn into office, people noticed something about Barack Obama they didn't know before. He's black. And ever since, people have been learning this about him, which the media helped to cover up. His popularity has been in decline. Ample job growth, the economy is rebounding, Obamacare, none of it matters. People hate this man because after almost 4 years in office, they're coming to realize that he's black.
It's that
science.
HDTV.
You can't deny science.
Yes, it's HDTV. That's what it is. It's that extra resolution that's slowly beginning to dawn on all of us. My God, wait a minute. What have we done? Scott, while Mrs. Obama kindly concedes that the Democratic Party's Jim Crow laws, because it was Republicans that ended slavery, it was Republicans that broke the chains of the slave. It was the Democrats that came up with Jim Crow and the KKK and all that stuff. But the Jim Crow laws, apparently, think of the recent past, as recent as a century ago, really. She says, quote, "We know that our journey is far, far from finished," which made me think, Scott, how will we know when the journey is finished? How will we know, Scott, Will it be when we elect a black president, maybe? And isn't that the violation that I talked about, namely that the 2008 deal was, you elect me, a complete unknown, and you won't be racist anymore, except, of course, for Tea Partiers and Republicans and stupid police departments and people who say Chicago and critics of my deficits or anyone else that disagrees with me.
Let me tell you, here's how we'll know when the civil rights battle has been won. When, on the evening of November 6th, we learned that Barack Obama has been voted out of office. And here's why. Because for years and years, black men have been treated with deference and patronage and sort of a hand reaching down from the whites to lift them up out of their desperate situation. But we finally have a black president of the United States who has achieved something. And I'll tell you, on the night he was elected, I wept. I wept with joy that the United States of America had come to a point where that issue was gone and the barrier was broken. I was so excited about that. But the next step in the civil rights movement is to vote this guy out, because what we're saying then is that we judge you by your accomplishments. We judge you by your abilities. We judge you by your character. We don't judge you by the color of your skin anymore.
Yeah. And we don't much care for your accomplishments or your character. You know, Steve, America has a racist fever, and the only cure is more cowbell. The First Lady then says, what exactly do we do about children who are languishing in crumbling schools? What about kids growing up in neighborhoods where they don't have opportunities worthy of their dreams? What about the 40% of black children who are overweight or obese, or the nearly 1 in 2 who are on track to develop diabetes in their lifetime? What court case do we bring on their behalf? What laws can be passed to end those wrongs, unquote. See, Steve, what America really needs to get people back on track and get back to work, especially the minorities in this country, because black unemployment is probably 25% among teenagers. What America really needs in order to get these people back to work are more court cases and more new laws.
Oh, absolutely. I recently read one of those just great utopian novels, the kind that gives you hope and hope in and for a perfect world. It's called Atlas Shrugged. It's written by this Ayn Rand fellow. I think it's new. And he talks about a law called Directive 10289. It makes everybody equal and brings brotherhood to the nation by empowering the government to tell everybody exactly what to do all the time. And we could have a law just like 10289 right now if it weren't for racist Republicans hating Barack Obama for being black.
Yeah, 10289, look it up. It's coming. It's probably here already. You know, folks, I'm just out of outrage here. I'm just out. I suspect that's the goal of these people. This lawyer, First Lady, and her lawyer husband, the President of the United States of America, tells pretty damn near daily that we live in a racist country and all we really need are more money, more laws, and more suing. I think we need to spend less money. I think we need fewer laws. I think we need tort reform. And I think we need a return to Chicago of these awful, awful people with those awesome, awesome smiles of theirs. For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle.